Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Josh Bonanno. Josh is a mixing engineer based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Josh first appeared on the show back on episode 33, which I'm realizing was a freaking long time ago. That was like 100. I think by the time this airs, that'll be 120 episodes ago.
Wow, I love it.
And yeah, so we touched base recently, and I invited him back on the air, which he's graciously agreed to do. So with all that to say, welcome back to Secret Sonics, Josh.
Yo, thanks for having me. That's crazy to think about that I was number like 30 and now it's been that long.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's insane. So much has happened.
Yeah.
Literally, it was pre-pandemic, your episode.
Yeah. I mean, I'm stoked that you're still doing the podcast too. I mean, that's a long time to kind of commit to podcasting and do that.
It's been a journey, man. I don't know. Podcasting it's completely shifted since we last spoke for me of what it is. But like at the time, I think it was me making content around the time that, we spoke, and me trying to figure out how do I get myself out into the internet ethers. And now it's like about relationships and meeting people and kind of having a little space on the internet of a community or just like a group of people that I know. And I don't know, it's completely evolved. And it's like, it helps. It's helped me with my brand or whatever, but it's like, that's almost like a second thought, and it hasn't helped me that much directly, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. I was going to ask you about that earlier, actually. Like, I guess what you've learned over all these years of podcasting and like what it's provided to you through all that. Cause I mean, like I love the idea of the community and whatnot. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting space. We were schmoozing before we officially started the podcast about, all kinds of stuff, but yeah, life is interesting, and it takes you in different directions than you realize originally.
Yeah, well, things take on a new meaning too, like you said. Yeah. You start for one reason, but then you kind of find the value in a different reason, or even just a different season of life. It means something different to you at that time versus the other. So it's cool. It's great. I mean, I'm thankful to be here, and I'm thankful that you have that little community, and that, I think it's valuable. I listen to the podcast, a lot as they kind of pop up here and there. You've had some great conversations. So
thanks,
keep
man.
it up.
I appreciate it, Josh.
Yeah,
well, how about
absolutely.
you, man? It's been 120 episodes. Like, how are you doing? What's been happening over in Nashville for you for the last, I don't even know how many, I guess it's been like 2 years plus.
Yeah. It's Nashville. Everything's changing a lot, but no, it's been great. I mean, obviously the pandemic was hard for a lot of people. I mean, I feel thankful that, my career didn't shift or change too much. I mean, doing what I do, mixing records, like I've always not been detached, but, I kind of have my space that I work, send it, and I work remotely, even with people here in town. I mean, it's always sort of just they send me files, send it back. So it was honestly a smooth transition work-wise through the pandemic. Obviously, I think, mentally and emotionally, it took a toll on everybody. But, I'm thankful for that I could kind of still just cruise and work and do my thing through it all. Everything shifted, and, you kind of had to form relationships and, build your community, quote unquote, in a different way. So, but yeah, I mean, other than that, just still making music, still, mixing records, kind of just growing, the brand and the business and the community. I mean, that's something I've been thinking a lot about too, is, as I have a successful, quote unquote, career to some extent, like I pay my bills and I'm generally comfortable, quote unquote, in that sense, like, you start asking yourself the question of like, what now? And then it's, to me, I've kind of been harping on that idea of like, how do you build a community around this? Or how do you, I don't know, I don't really have a desire to like teach or anything like that. So how do you sort of just start conversation around things and, throw a helping hand out, or, just spread knowledge or whatever that may be, or insight. So yeah, I kind of been toying with those ideas and seeing what that looks like, whether it be in real life or in the internet ethos of whatever social media looks like currently. So
what about podcasting? Have you thought about that?
Yeah. I mean, I was doing this thing, I guess it's been maybe a year or two at this point, where I was just doing Instagram lives like every Thursday, and they still exist on my Instagram. If you go check them out, you could watch them. And I actually was in the process of uploading them to YouTube and whatnot. So they exist. So that was kind of my, like, it's not an official podcast, but it could be if I just ripped the audio from it.
The lo-fi podcast,
Pretty much, yeah. And those were really great. And that was, sort of my beginning of fostering that community, and it was great. But, life gets busy, and planning and dealing with that just takes a lot of time. So I admittedly just haven't done that in probably close to a year now, a little less than a year. But it's definitely something I want to get back into. And the reason I stopped was because I, was thinking if I'm going to continue to do this, I want to do it in a little bit less of a lo-fi way and a little more of an intentional way where it's maybe a little easier to consume. Like everybody's not maybe on Instagram at the time when it's live, or like there's probably better ways for people to interact with this as well, whether it became more of a podcast situation or whether it became more of a, like I've toyed the idea of doing like Twitch type stuff or different things like that. So it's an idea in my mind still. It's just not something I've fully fleshed out or figured out really the best plan of attack to do it. So if anybody listening has any ideas, hit me up.
Yeah.
Or the other thing too is like, I think, as much as I'm passionate about it and want to do it, I think deep down I sort of need a partner to do it with in some extent. Like I think it's just a lot for me to take on and have the vision myself with everything else that I have going on in life and the music that I do and whatnot. So it would definitely be something that I think I'd probably have to team up with somebody on or do in that capacity, just because I know I would burn out pretty quick. So
yeah, I totally hear that. I really wanted to actually start this podcast with a co-host. And I thought in my mind, it has to be somebody that is, at least as sociable and interesting as me, if not more so. And the person I had in mind, I basically reached out to, and he said, he's like, I'd really love to do this, but I know I'm not going to commit to it, so I can't say yes. And I was like, screw it, I got to just do it, myself.
Yeah.
And then,
no, I mean, I love that. Like, there has to come a point where you're just like, I'm doing it, and then like if somebody comes along after, like it's easier to add. But yeah, I mean, that's always been the issue that I've had is like, because I know it's a lot to ask for somebody to commit to as well, Right. And then I also. Not that I like to think I'm hard to work with, but I'm particular in like my vision of things. So it does make working together on things hard sometimes, just because I have my vision. I want to do it my way.
Right.
And I'm not maybe always the best at communicating that. So then at the end of it, I'm like, it's just easier. I'll just do it myself,
Right.
So I'm working on that.
It's a perfectionistic trap. We need to learn to let go.
Yeah. Yes, agreed. I
definitely
care
do
less, I guess. Yeah.
Same.
No, you're totally right. Yeah, so that's kind of been the holdup in that. But yeah, that's definitely something I'm passionate about and thoughtful about. I don't know, and again, I like to view the landscape of like where people are hanging out and what that looks like. And I think the social media is in a really weird place currently, which is why I haven't maybe jumped into anything quite yet, just because I just don't know that like the right platform for community is there yet. Like TikTok to me is a great place, and I'm a huge TikTok fan, and I think what's happening on there is amazing, but it's just not a place of community, I don't feel like.
Right. Yeah.
Instagram's just dead at this point,
Really? You think so?
Yeah, to some extent.
I've been finding that the algorithm has been burying me more recently.
Yeah, I mean, you're at the algorithm's just, stronghold, and then something about it just feels like it's on its way out and everybody kind of knows it, and it's just full of sort of spam type stuff. And like, I'm very interested in the Twitch and Discord stuff, but that also feels like a younger demographic than where I'm at and the age I'm growing to, you know what I mean? So it's hard for me to understand those platforms, just because
I'm so over. I have a Discord, and I'd be happy for everybody on the show to kind of join the Discord, which, every once in a while something cool happens, but it's still kind of very much in its sapling stage, so to speak. But like, I'm overwhelmed in general from Discord of just like the other groups that I'm in, just constant notifications popping up. And I'm just like, dude, I don't have mental capacity to like look at any of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I have a great respect for people who have like, quote unquote, whatever successful Discord means, but like people who have active, like communities. I think it's great for that. But again, I just look at like the people that are in my community already, and I know they're not going to get on Discord. Like I know it's destined to fail before it even starts, just because nobody knows how to use it. Like I don't really know how to use it. I can't keep up with it. How can I ask, my community to do that?
Just like Dolby Atmos or something, right?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
We won't go there, but
let's not go there. Yeah.
Just kidding. I mean, yeah, it's all fine. It's just, I don't know. I think you find your thing and then you kind of stick with that or whatever that looks like. So
I don't know. I still feel like Instagram is where it's happening in terms of like our community of like the audio community. That seems to be where I'm able to connect with people the most, reach out to potential guests. It just seems to be where I also find out about what's going on with people in the industry, what they're up to. TikTok is amazing for just, I guess, entertainment, really. It's like an entertainment platform more than anything else. But it's not really a community, like you said, or a place to necessarily share knowledge even. Like Instagram, you could share knowledge on, and TikTok is really just about entertaining people on the platform, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could do anything on TikTok if it's entertaining, but no, you're right. I mean, Instagram, I don't mean to like talk bad about Instagram. Instagram definitely is like still where I hang out for sure. I just don't think Instagram's a place you can grow currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like whether that be grow a community or grow, an artist career, like it's just not a place to grow. And I think if I were to be looking to like start a community or foster a community, like there needs to be a way for it to organically grow in a way for it to meet the vision of what I would want of it. And Instagram's not that. Right. And what it comes down to is you just need a combination of all the things, I think, like if you start a podcast, like that podcast needs to have a presence on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube.
Right.
And probably Facebook, like it's got to be everywhere. And
that's exhausting.
Yeah, I was going to say like, that sounds very tiresome to me.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, at the end of the day, is probably just my own fault. But
I mean, we were kind of schmoozing about this before the interview started also, just about like, making all the content for the content, right? Like I have this podcast, but I make these reels and I'm making these YouTube highlight clips, and it's just like the amount of work that you could do to promote the show never ends and just can only grow, and there's only more places to post about it, and it makes you think
for the content. Yeah.
Yes.
I love that.
Content for content's sake. Literally. It's crazy. It's like, when does it end?
Yeah, it's tiresome. It's exhausting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and that's kind of what I do always come back to, like, that I love about Nashville is, yes, there's this content thing. And I think it's beautiful that you can exist in the music industry, whatever that looks like, wherever you are in the world, and have community of audio people or other musicians or whatever that may be. You could find anything you want on the internet, people who are just like you. And that's crazy because 5-10 years ago, you couldn't even do that. But but something like being in Nashville where, I could walk out my door and like literally the neighbor who lives 5 feet behind me is like a songwriter and a videographer, and like we're good friends, and like just like that immediate like real community of like in real life. Is still, I think there's something valuable. Over that, over, social media and whatnot.
Yeah. I think also to really be successful at whatever field of audio you're doing, there's definitely some benefit to being in a big city like Nashville or LA or maybe London or whatever. But like I spoke with a guy named Irko on the show who mixed the latest Kanye record. He's done a lot of big hip hop records, and he was in Italy doing like, every aspect of the process. And then when he got to LA, he was able to kind of niche into mixing. And he kind of explained to me, it's like, you can't really go hard on one thing unless you're in a big city. Now, I'm not sure if that's 100% true anymore, but like having that kind of like community of real people there that kind of be like, oh yeah, Josh is a mixer, go check, just at a bar. Like you can't like.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like people don't understand it anywhere else, like in Nashville, the question isn't like, oh, what do you do? It's like, what part of the music thing do you do? Like they just get it more. Whereas like, when I was living back in Jersey, it'd be like, oh, you make music? That's cool. But down here, it's like, oh, I make music. And they're like, oh, we already get that. Like, we know you're in Nashville. Of course you make music.
What
like,
do you do?
Are you an artist? Are you a producer? Are you a songwriter? Are you a mastering engineer? Like, do you know what I mean? It's more of like, cool, So, it just goes without saying that like you're artsy down here essentially. but yeah, I think it's the community that keeps you like wanting to do it, like, because the internet, there's something fatiguing about the internet to me, where it's like, it's great and community's awesome and it exists, but there's something that happens with the screen, I think, that becomes fatiguing, that it's easier to like get jaded or like burnt out on. But like when you hang out in person, and this is maybe different for other people, who are maybe a little less social. Not that I'm a huge social person by any means, but but there's something about the energy of like being in real life and being at a show and like hanging out with your friends that I think isn't as fatiguing, or fatiguing in a different way than like the social media thing.
I totally vibe with that. Yeah, it's like, it's inspiring. Like for me, when I do an interview,
inspiring. It's a good one.
I always walk away inspired and jazzed to work on the music, right? Like when I'm scrolling on YouTube or more often like Instagram or Facebook, and I see what other people are doing and like asking questions, I just get like, I don't even want to deal with this. I just want to check out.
Yeah.
The industry is so annoying. Like I find it annoying when I see it on the internet. And when I talk to somebody in real life who's working on stuff and I ask them questions and they ask me questions and it's like a real dialogue, I'm just like so hyped to work on music afterwards. Like I get so inspired from talking to people in that maybe because it's really personal. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you lose the nuance of communication, I think, with typing or even through video or whatever that becomes. Whereas, when you're in person, there's not that like extra second to like put on a front or to like think about your answer. You're kind of just responding in a way that does come from emotion and passion. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, and that's why, I love Nashville. I don't know that I'll like die here, I'll maybe move away just to have space someday. But like the community is like unmatched as far as that goes, like you walk out your door and you're just meeting people who are inspiring, even if you don't work together, even if they're in a totally different genre, or even if they're in a totally different like area of art, like it's not just music down here. I mean, there's tons of like small business owners, there's tons of like just entrepreneurs, there's a ton of just like artists in general, like making different types of art. So it's very inspiring. And that's not to say just Nashville's like that. I mean, you could probably find that in most cities to some extent. But Nashville's the South and it's a little homier than some cities, I think. So it's a little more welcoming in that sense, but yeah, community.
Yeah, I feel that. So speaking of that, where's your work coming from these days? Like, how are artists finding out about you? How are you, getting your leads, so to speak?
Yeah, getting my leads. I mean, at this point, everybody always asks me that, and it always immediately like throws a red flag in my mind that like, oh, I need to do better at like actually finding work, because at this point in my career, like I just, for better or worse, like wait for the phone to ring, which it usually just rings every day, So it's sort of just...
That's a good place to be.
Kind of, but it's also a scary place to be because, what if it doesn't ring today?
Right.
I don't have any systems for like reaching out to people or like getting work. So it'd be kind of like, oh, okay, I actually have to try now, which sounds so pretentious for me to just sit here and be like, oh, people call me. But I think you do just get to a point in your career where that just starts to happen. Like you just kind of become, not that like I'm a household name or anything, but people talk, and they see what you did with one song and then they call you for the next, or you start working with artists who just get more successful and they start putting out more songs. So that keeps you more busy. And then people know that band and then they go, oh, well, or that band's like producing for another band. That's especially here in Nashville, that's entirely true, where like, everybody's a songwriter producer. So like they might have their band that I work for. And then, the singer, somebody goes off and records for another band or writes with them and goes, oh yeah, man, like we cut this demo, but like, yeah, Josh, he'll mix it. Like he does all our band stuff. So that's kind of, the cycle of where I'm at, in my career now, of just that sort of thing. And that's not to say there's not occasionally like somebody that I'll stumble upon and be like, oh, this is like, that to me is what TikTok is. Like I just try and spend a few minutes every day just scrolling, and my For You pages just become artists or songwriters or people. So occasionally there's something that I like really resonate with, and I'll follow them or just say, hey man, this art's great. Like if you ever need anything, let me know. So occasionally there's some stuff that happens that way. But I mean the heavy lifting of my work and money comes from just having been doing it for 10 years or something now at this point.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that was a point I was going to say was like from everybody I've interviewed, it just seems like it takes about 10 years to make this industry work for you. And it could be 5 years, it could be 15 years, but like 10 years seems to be the average of how long it takes. Like the amount of persistence you need to have in this industry is just like almost unparalleled. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy.
It's just not stopping. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the thing is like, you kind of only fail if you quit, you know?
Yes.
If you keep pushing, like even if you have a rough month, the next one might be better. Or maybe you have 2 rough months and the third one's better. Maybe you have 4, you know, like, and you know, you've seen those memes and like success stories of like, you know, Apple started in a garage and they pushed through, or like this business wasn't profitable until year 10, you know, like, and that's, you know, I watch entrepreneur stuff in that type of space very closely. And that's what people don't talk about is like most businesses, no matter how big they are, don't profit for the first 5 years. So, you know, when you look at your career in that same way, it's kind of like, oh, okay. Even if I fail miserably for the first 5 years, like that's normal, you know?
Yes.
You know, year 6, 7, 8, like, okay, now I should start seeing some success or whatever that looks like. But you know, we get into this industry and we want to make $1 million day one, be successful day one, pay our bills. And that's just not the reality of like the way that a business works in general. So, and it's hard because, you know, we are the product, we are our art to some extent. So it's a little more personal when it takes 5 years. For
identity issues. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many millions of things that could go into that. But yeah, that's just what that's, you know, if I could tell my younger self something, or, you know, when people always ask me like that type of thing, I'm just like, patience, show up every day, do the thing every day. Patience. And that's
you've already answered the final question of the show now, so we can move on.
Patience.
Yeah, patience. It's so important. It's so important.
It's the impossible task, but it's the only thing that pays off, I guess.
Yeah.
To say that's not true. I mean,
well, a lot
showing up is what pays off, but patience is sort of the thing that brings the peace through it all, I guess.
It's the necessary way to get there without a heart attack.
Or giving up. If you don't have patience, you'll just give up and you'll just be like, oh, well, it's not working. So
yeah. Well, you know, you mentioned like how like a year 5 or 6 or 7, you can't always, it's hard to kind of gauge, am I getting there? Will this work out by year 10?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you were kind of telling me about like, before we started recording, about like gauging your success, gauging where you're at in the industry. You want to share with the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, my thing is like, it is hard to gauge. And that's something I've struggled with a long time. Even as like artists, I think, you know, struggle to gauge success. And I think putting goals out is like part of it. But I mean, my thing is like, I just want to work on a lot of music, you know, because I think at the end of the day, like that's what leads to the thing that we're talking about, the success of, you know, nobody, like there's no successful mixer out there. There's no successful, like even songwriter or artist out there who's like, oh yeah, I wrote one song and that was it. And then it was amazing. It was huge. And I retired because of it. It's always like, oh no, I did 400, 500, 600. So like, you know, I started just applying that to the idea of what I'm doing of, I just want to work on as much music as possible. And A, it's going to make me better. B, it's just going to keep me busy. C, like if I do 10,000 songs, like eventually something's going to stick, you know, like eventually somebody's going to know me for something, or eventually, you know, if I do 10,000 songs, like my chances of winning a Grammy are higher, or my chances of just pushing the needle forward as far as culture goes are higher, you know, because they're just, you're making the odds bigger. And the same thing with like being an artist, you know, and there's a level to say that like there has to be quality in that. Like you can't just, but quality comes with quantity, I think, to some extent, if you're really caring and putting like as much energy as you can into it. So it is a balance, but you know, same thing with just being an artist. Like you can't just put out one song and then be upset when it doesn't do anything. Like you kind of have to
I know. I see that so much with artists of like they work their asses off to get out that first single, and then they look way too deeply into what other people think about it.
Yeah.
Or they're just so perfectionistic about even just letting that first song go. And I was talking to an artist that came to me for mixing help, and like she needs a bit more than that. She needs like drum editing, and I don't even know if this is gonna work out, but like. Yeah. I basically told her, I was like, listen, like, I know this song is really important to you, but you have to understand that this is not the only song. Like, this can't be the only song. Like, it's almost more important that you let the song go than you perfect this song. Because until you put out this song, you're not going to get to the next song. And like, I'm like, unfortunately, this is not going to be your hit. Like, you need to put out a bunch more songs. Like, this is the first step.
People come to me all the time and ask for like, mix tips, or like they'll send me a song and be like, what do you think of the mix? And I'll, usually just give them notes or tell them thoughts or whatever it may be. And sometimes they'll tweak it and they'll come back and they'll be like, what do you think now? And like, I'm like, cool, like whatever, like, and they'll keep coming back and I'm just like, look, like at this point, you're going to become a better mixer by just calling it a day on that song. Like you're not getting more mixing experience by tweaking 100 times. Yes. You're getting more mixing experience by mixing 40 songs in that same amount of time.
Exactly.
Like you don't get experience chasing your own tail, like you're running in a circle at that point. You're not like running forward. So even if you're running forward really
that's
slowly,
a quotable
like,
quote.
Like you're still going somewhere rather than like just chasing your own tail. And I think it's easy to get caught in that sort of echo chamber of just chasing your own tail. And just being so like kind of close-sighted to it. Whereas if you kind of just open your ideas. Yeah. Like if you just open your eyes to, more opportunities, I think that's where you kind of actually gain experience, like even beyond mixing, there's other things that I've done throughout my career. There's other things I still do. Like I just recently took a random job, like recording audiobooks, where I just sit in the studio and the talent's in there reading a book and I follow the script and punch, record, and take notes, and like that makes me a better mix engineer. Like it has nothing to do with mixing even a little bit. I'm literally hitting record, reading a audiobook script and doing that. But it makes me a better mixer because I'm more attentive. Like it's gotten me more familiar with working out of different studios. Like it's gotten me more familiar with working with talent. Like so like you just need more experience in all aspects, and everything affects everything. So it's totally that, and I used to do a lot more like sound for picture, TV, radio work. That made me a better mixer too, because again, like you're working on tighter deadlines, you're working quicker, you're working with bigger sessions, you're working 2 pictures, so you start to visualize things differently. I would, if I didn't have that experience, like my mixes wouldn't sound the way that they do today, because it all adds up to certain things. So
right.
Yeah. If I would have just sat on one song and been like, no, I don't want to record audiobooks. I have this one song that I'm working on that I'm going to tweak 100 times. Like it's obvious there's more, experience to be had in doing more. And again, there has to be a point where something has to keep you in check as far as quality goes, because you can't just throw a limiter on the mix bus and be like, yeah, I mixed the song. Like there has to be some level to the art still. But yeah, that's my long ramble on.
So you're
gauging.
Your goal is to mix. You told me 300 songs this year.
Yeah, I think I did a little over 200 last year, and I'd love to hit 3 this year. So yeah, it's about halfway through the year currently, so we'll check in. But
how are you going to get enough artists to work with you to get 300 songs?
Well, that's what this podcast is for. I assume everybody listening is gonna reach out to me, and they're gonna hit me up and say, "Hey, I want to help you reach your goal, Josh.
I want to be number 272."
Yeah, there you go.
Let's go.
Just kidding. No, I mean, and that comes back to the idea of like, I should probably work harder at like doing that, because again, I'm just sort of being like, oh, I hope 300 people call me this year, But yeah, I mean, it's about halfway through the year, and I'm about halfway there. So we'll see what happens.
Are you finding that it's are you burning out from mixing so many songs so quickly? Like, because I spoke with DK Waddell from the Mixing Music podcast, and he told me I think he told me in 2020 he did like over 300 songs, and he totally burnt out. But he said he got really good at mixing by doing that many songs. And
I'm not burning out. I definitely feel myself getting better every day. I'm also getting quicker every day at doing it. But I'm not like a huge systems and practices types of person where like I have my, but I did just take on an assistant who's been helping me prep sessions and kind of take some workload of like other dumb stuff that takes time away from me actually mixing. He helps me with that type of stuff. So that's definitely freed up just a lot of like physical time, but also just headspace that like now I could sit down, have the session already prepped how I know I like it.
Yeah.
Matches the rough. The rough comes out my separate output like I like everything's exactly how I would prep it. But now I could just sit down. So my time of like mental clarity of having to get things where they sometimes take time to even get to is gone. So now I have all that time to just like put it into a mix, and I feel myself already mixing quicker because of it.
Right. You're straight in that creative zone at that creative hour,
Totally. Yeah. I can just get on the bike and start pedaling rather than like having to assemble the bike and make sure it works first.
That's great.
So that's definitely helped. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just still hungry enough to want to do it. So
that's great. That
helps as well, to just keep pushing. But yeah, I mean, I don't think 300 is like a groundbreaking number either. I mean, it's probably a lot of mixes, but I know there's dudes out there doing significantly more than that even.
Yeah. That's like 6 a week, right? That's like skip Sundays or whatever, basically.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I do 2 a day, so it kind of equals itself out a little bit. Sometimes, they're songs I sort of produce as well, so there's like extra time and energy that goes in. Sometimes they go quick, so yeah.
Not too many revisions, I gather.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the revisions and whatnot is what does take the time, because then at that point you're kind of on the mercy of just the artist or producer to get their thoughts to you. So that definitely is what holds things up the most currently in my situation of, I could keep my schedule moving, get a song in and out in a day, but then it might be 2 weeks later and the artist is kind of still coming back and doing revisions. And like, I could power through revisions pretty quick, but it's just the managing of people really at that point too, that takes time. Which is, more of the name of the game than actually even mixing or making music is half the time. It's usually
oh my God. Dude, I always feel like I'm just juggling all the clients and all the projects and just trying to where am I at with all of these little things? Because I'm working at like, I know, like I kind of envy people that like, that work with a band for like 3 weeks and that's it. And they just make a record with the same group of people and then they mix it and then they're done and they move on to the next project. I'm like, I don't know, probably 15 projects at once,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm juggling a ton of stuff at once, but that's also kind of where the joy comes from for me too.
It's
like
fun.
Even last night I was doing like audio mover, like revisions with somebody, and I was just like, man, this is great. Like they had some ideas and I had some ideas and we're doing different delay throws, and like people will come over here a lot of times and we'll do revisions in person. And to me, that's at the end of the day, making music in a vacuum is just not the way music was meant to be made. I don't think.
No.
So yeah, I am picky and choosy about who I work with occasionally, so like if I feel like this just isn't, the song's just not there, or even just like, I just don't know that you and I are going to work together, well, like, something just doesn't creatively match with the way our communication styles work. I just don't do it, because at that point, the energy is not worth it's going to take too much energy, and I'm not going to want to do it. And then that's going to slow down my schedule, because now I'm putting this off because I don't want to get on a call, so that keeps me efficient as well, is doing things that I know I'm kind of the right fit for and that I want to do. And again, I'm genuinely thankful that I'm at a place that I could even say that, that I could say, no, I don't want to do this. But
yeah, no, it's amazing. Yeah, and hopefully we all get to a point where we can, everyone should be saying no to some projects. I think even if they're still at the beginning.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially if there's red flags, but yeah.
I mean, if I could go back in time, I would have said no to significantly more. Even if I was like desperate for the money, I still would have said no, because there's so many projects that just for my own mental health, like just left such a bad taste in either just in my mouth for either that song or that time of my life, or even just like maybe a circle of people, like I worked with this person, but now I see like it just didn't go well and I knew it wouldn't go well. And then now I just kind of view what they're doing as just a sour taste in my mouth. And that's like, I hate viewing somebody's art through that lens, that just because I had a bad experience, now I think badly of all the things. Even it was our own fault because like, our communication styles just didn't match. So
I feel like everybody also has spidey senses and they kind of, I think when you're younger or you're newer, you kind of have the spidey sense and then you kind of choose to ignore the spidey sense. And then
it's experience.
Exactly.
Comes back to experience. Like
you remember, no, don't do this.
Well, that also, totally that. But also when you're first starting out, it might only be your third client that you're working with. Like, so you don't even know their communication style, or you don't even know how you like to be communicated to, but 5-10 years into it, you're like, I've talked with hundreds of thousands of people. I've dealt with them in different ways. I've done email, I've done text, I've done calling. Like you get a better sense for kind of the way that things work for you, the way you like getting feedback and revisions, the way that, things work. So, And it makes you a happier person at the end of the day too. Like I say that all the time. Like I work with my friends, and I'm always stoked to say that. Like, I think you could probably go down my whole Spotify and I could explain the story of the person and just, call them a friend to some extent,
That's amazing.
And that pushes the art forward too, to some extent, because, it's more of a shared experience. We both kind of have skin in the game. We both are emotionally attached to it in a way. That's sort of the fulfillment that I get out of, what I do in mixing,
helping people, having that human interaction.
Yeah.
And that's,
because I'm,
yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, you're cool. I was just going to say that's probably a lot of the reason why people keep calling you, right? Is because you've had those human interactions, and that's why they'll recommend you to a friend, or they'll come back and do another song with you,
I mean, I would hope so, because I'm probably not the best mixer in the world. Like, I don't get, like, that's what I was going to say is, like, I don't necessarily get fulfillment from, like, hearing my mix playback on Spotify. Usually it's almost just like, oh, I would have changed that or done that different, but it's always this sort of remembered shared experience of like being a part of the record with somebody and knowing what it meant to them and whatnot.
Well, your mixes sound great, man. So I think we're all way more self-conscious about the way our mixes sound than other people are. Like, I listen to my mix and I hear the things I could have done better, or the places of failure where other people just hear a mix and a song that translates.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's like,
absolutely,
like how the sausage was made, so you have that in your head when you hear it, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah. But I forget where my mind was going on that. But you're totally right. I mean, it's you'll never turn that off, which is kind of why it's hard for me to like listen back to the music as much as I love the art that I made. Like, it's hard for me. Somebody was asking me recently, like, how often I listen to the music that I work on, and I'm just like, never really. I mean, I'll listen to it like the day it comes out and throw it on a playlist, and like there's a few songs that I enjoy, I mean, I enjoy all of it, but there's just something, like once you're kind of like the same way that I feel like artists probably don't listen to their own music, or if they do, it's definitely listening to it from a different place than if they were to like listen to the new Justin Bieber record or something, like there's just, because you're so in it, you can't detach yourself and become just a listener.
Yes.
At least I can't, but maybe some people can, but I can't.
Yeah. And that's why you got to delegate parts of the process to other people, right? That's why you need a mastering engineer. And that's why...
Absolutely.
Yeah. A mixing engineer. All those things. Super important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because you lose perspective so quickly.
So fast. Yeah. Like so I was curious about like how fast you mix, like if you're doing so many songs. Because I lose objectivity pretty quickly, and like I sent out a first pass of a mix today, and I got very good feedback on it. But I was like, cool, I'm probably gonna keep fine tuning this because my ears have lost. I'm like, I need an ear break, and I'll come back to this tomorrow. Like, like, are you like sending out like, I'm kind of mixing up a bunch of questions in one, but like, are you sending
Sure.
out one mix where you're like, this is the final mix? This is a mix I'm proud of. What do you think? Like, approved, or is this like, hey, can I get some? This is a direction. Are you vibing with it? And then also, how long does it take you to get to that point?
It really depends. I mean, there's two different ways that mixes have to get done sometimes. Sometimes I get stuff where like the rough's already dialed, like, and I'm there for the final, like the finishing stuff. Those mixes, I mean, I'll mix a song a day, basically. It's kind of the way I'll mix. Like, and I'll have, a first pass either the end of the day, or sometimes I like wake up the next day and get it out. Or if I did prep it myself, I kind of have like a 3-day window on it, because I'll prep it and maybe fader balance and then mix the next day and whatever. So either way, that. But yeah, there's two styles of mixes that I feel like I get. Like the one that's already kind of dialed, the vision of the record is there, I should say. Like, but then sometimes I get other stuff where like the rough's not really there. There may not even be a rough, which a lot of those gigs I turn down, because if there's not a rough, that usually means it's something happened along the way that somebody couldn't make a decision. But a lot of times maybe the rough's not there, or it's not a great rough, or the vision's not well thought out and it's sort of a little raw still. Those are the ones where it's not that I'm not confident in where I landed with the mix, but it's a little more open-ended of like, is this what you guys wanted out of it? I don't really know, because you guys didn't commit to a sonic thing in your rough mix.
I got you.
So that's where there's a little more like room for conversation sometimes of like, hey, here's where I think it should go. What do you guys think? And sometimes they go back and that's awesome. That's exactly what we wanted. Or, they didn't have the vision for the rough anyway, which is why they hired me, and that's great. But, and other times it's like, well, I don't know, maybe like we didn't really want the drums feeling like that. Maybe like it's more of had it envisioned as more of like a vocal forward record. And it's like, oh, cool. Okay, I get that too. And then from there, it's maybe a little back and forth. But yeah, so those records are always a little more open-ended. They're usually a little more of a challenge, just because, you kind of have to create the picture. Like the picture's not already there. You have all the elements of the picture, but you kind of have to do it. Whereas the other, a mix that I get that like the rough's already kicking, it's already slamming, already sounds great. Like the whole thing's there. Then it's just, you're just making sure all the lines are sharp. Everything's, really crystal clear, pristine.
Yeah, in focus.
In focus. Yeah, it's just dialing the focus versus like composing the entire image and getting the f-stop and like the aperture and the shutter speed.
Mm-hmm.
All that's already dialed. It's just moving the focus ring a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's not to say I don't get records like that sometimes that I completely do something different with if I feel necessary, but
those are the records that people like to call like when like the mixer is a finisher, right? Like in the pop world, Absolutely. At least that's what people have been saying.
Yeah. And I'm also at the point in my career now where it's like you start working with more producers who, you already know. Like, I've worked with a lot of my people are regulars, so it's like the regular producer. It's like I know what they're going for. Or I know what the files are going to be like coming in, so I know what I need to do to get it there. Or it's just like good already, and that's part of that's working in like an environment that I trust and know well and sounds good and is flat and like translates. Like I don't necessarily like do a car test or like question my decisions. Like I know what I'm doing in this room, so I could work really quick because of that too. It's not like, oh, I boosted top end, but I don't, it doesn't like feel as bright, or like, let me put it on AirPods. Oh yeah, wait, what happened there? Like it's sibilant now, but like it doesn't feel sibilant on my speak. Like I don't have those questions. So that helps me move really quick too, of just knowing what I'm doing works. I'll throw on AirPods, take a walk to get like a fresh ear break, listen to it on AirPods, be like, cool. All right, let's do 2 more moves and then send it out. So that helps things moving forward as well too, is just the confidence of that. Yeah. And that also just comes with doing it for so long. Like even 2 years ago, I didn't have that confidence to trust my gut of like, I know what I'm doing here, or I know how it feels in this room, and I know that's how it needs to do. Like, to feel.
Reps on your monitors in your listening space.
in a correct listening space too.
In a correct,
because,
yes, of
you
course.
could get, I think you could get reps. Like it's like going to the gym. Like you could be going to the gym, and be like I went to the gym every day, but like you come back and you're not putting on muscle and you're hurting yourself technically. Like it's very easy to go to the gym, have bad form, and like tear muscles and like actually hurt your body, get a hernia. Like those are real things that happen. That could also happen in your studio. Like you could think you're making dope records, but you're just getting used to making really loud, muddy records or something. So it's got to be done in a sort of controlled, trustworthy space, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in my room is pretty well treated, but when I bought the monitors I'm working on now, that I just the trust went up like I don't know, tenfold. Like,
yeah,
I'm not even on such crazy expensive monitors. I'm like focal shaped twins.
Yeah.
But they translate so well. I just trust every EQ move at this point, which I didn't with my previous speakers. And now it's like, okay, cool. And then I'll do what you do, like with the AirPods. It just kind of, when I'm making coffee or something in the other room,
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you need that creative change too, I mean, I've been toying with the idea of changing up the monitors too, just because, what works one day might not work the next. And sometimes you need a little bit of a new creative lens to view it through for you to, at that point, it's maybe a little bit less about confidence and a little bit more about you're maybe focusing on something different in your mixes than you were previously, like maybe before you were really focused on just getting flat, like mixes that were balanced and translated. And now it's like, now that you got that down, like that skill set's down, like now you're like really interested in like, how can I get them to like be wide, or like, how can I get them to be loud, or how can I get them to like be like, feel really deep? Or how can I make my drums hit harder? Like I think there's always certain things that like, at least in my mind, the way that I work, I'm always in tune to, so whether that's like, oh, I'm really on a vocal kick recently, and certain monitors, once you get to a certain price point with monitors, they're all just fine. Like they're all doing the same thing. They're all trustworthy. Like they're all using, they're different designs and they sound different, but it's just preference at that point. And, stylistically can maybe help you hear, see something different. So
why replace your monitors? Why not just get another pair?
Well, because the ones that I would want would be very expensive, and because again, like at some point they're all fine. Like they're all full range monitors that are going to give you the frequency spectrum. Like why do I need two monitors that do that just slightly different?
Right.
I'm also just not a big reference guy anymore for that reason as well. Like if you trust something, why do you need two of them?
It's different with like the mixed cubes, but like
totally, yeah.
But
I mean,
with the full range monitors,
exactly. They serve a little bit of a different purpose, I think. You're not really, that's more of like a reference thing than it is actually, mixing, let's say. But yeah, and it's just at the end of the day, it's like something to inspire you too. Like if you're tired of sitting in this room, like maybe change your room up, and then you'll want to mix in the room, and you won't be distracted as much, and you won't want to pick up your phone every 3 seconds to like check your Facebook or whatever, because you're actually really in your room and you really enjoy listening to your brand new PMCs or whatever they are. So yeah,
stay inspired, people.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a slippery slope too, because then you have the people who are like, I'm buying something new every day, I got to stay inspired. Like that's kind of a trap you could fall into too, thinking, in order to be inspired, you need to buy something new constantly. So you kind of have to be a little bit aware of like, am I just trying to warrant just spending money and buying gear, or like, am I actually just kind of like burnt out and ready for something new that, will get me out of maybe a rut that I'm in.
Yeah, because it really can inspire. Buying new things can really inspire new creativity. Like I buy new bass, like that's a massive thing for me, right? Like that's gonna change the game.
Yeah.
And my buddy was showing me his like I don't even know what it's called, but it's like a drum machine. It's like one of those $300 drum machines that it's all tactile and everything. It's like, oh cool, I do everything on MIDI in the computer, but this is like it's tactile and it's inspiring, and like all of a sudden you're like messing with filters and you're making these really cool sounds. It's just like, that's a different experience than trying to program something on your computer. And it's so much more instant and visceral. And like, oh, I get that. Spending $300 on this kind of like drum machine could really inspire a lot of creativity. And it's like, so yeah, spending money does help, but you don't want it to be a crutch, I guess, so to speak, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if there's I wish there was a better answer or way of understanding like at what point that is, but I think part of it's like self-control.
Budget.
Budget, some people maybe don't do that as much. But yeah, I mean, I'm the type who will talk myself out of something all the time. Just because like I don't need it, I might want it, but like I can still like I have fine gear already. Like I don't need new speakers. I don't need a new interface.
Right, but with new things, you might get somewhere that you didn't even know you could get to. We don't need necessarily anything more than we already have, right? An interface, a computer, speakers. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But something else can help. Yeah, I don't know. Are you fully in the box these days? What does your workflow look like?
I am. I mean, I have outboard gear, and I've accumulated some stuff over the years, and I use it to like record on the front end, occasionally when I do that, which isn't often, but I'll produce every once in a while, and I like having kind of knobs to twist and turn, and that inspires me on that sense. But as far as mixing, yeah, it's all in the box for me. Again, just trying to move quick. I also feel like my mixing style is much more less bold, big picture, sort of like I don't do the top down sort of thing. Like I'm not pushing hard into gear. I'm much more of like a chisel and like fine tooth comb sort of person than I am like pushing in. And like I feel like outboard gear, you can't really be so finite and like minuscule with you kind of have to push it and pull it and let it do its thing. That's just not the way I mix, really. Right. It works for some people who love to just like push into it and like it's the old school way. Like if you ever watch those CLA videos, which is why I hate mix tips from CLA, it's like what people don't realize is like look at his mix bus, he's taking 10 dB off, like he's pushing it so hard into stuff that like that's why he's doing 10 dB at 10K and 10 dB
right, because it's getting attenuated by the compressors.
Exactly. Like you're pushing and pulling so hard. And that's just not the way that I mix normally. So I'm much more of a like FabFilter Pro Q guy who's like boosting a dB here, cutting a dB there, and like working more in that fashion. And that just, you have to be in the box to do that sort of thing. So that's why I've kind of gone all in the box. And it also just takes the questioning out of it. There's always differences in outboard gear. One day I would turn something on and like, for some reason, the left channel would be like a half dB less. And now I'm like, instead of working, now I'm like trying to figure out what happened on my patch bay or like if the gear's weird today or something like, and there's nothing more frustrating to me than that. Like waking up every day and being like, oh, I got to crawl behind my rack today because some reason it's doing this. So yeah, fully in the box.
Callability all the way.
Yeah. Doesn't make for good Instagram pictures, but
who cares? Makes for good mixes. I mean, it seems like more and more people are just going all in on the box these days. Like there's definitely still something to outboard gear, but it just doesn't seem like anybody who's, I don't know, the younger breed of mixers. I guess like the millennial breed, the millennial mixers all seem to be moving into the box, like pretty much fully.
I mean, even producers. I mean, the whole landscape of making music nowadays is wildly different than it was even 4 years ago. It's pretty, even 2 years ago. It's crazy what you can do. And even sonically, like, I mean, that's kind of what I was starting to try and say earlier, I think is even sonically, the idea of something that sonically sounds good is such a moving target nowadays that it's hard to even, for me at least, get excited about that. Like if you listen to New Music Friday, like some of that stuff just sounds awful, awful to my ears. But it's top 40. It's the Chainsmokers. Like, who's questioning that? Like that's just what it sounds like nowadays. So the idea of chasing good or bad is really just kind of an endless goal that you're never going to get to, I think. I think there's you know, certain things that are maybe more correct than others, but like that to me has just become something that I can't chase anymore because I'll go crazy, you know? Like,
yeah, the Steely Dan era is over of, you know, those archetypical records that just sounded so good because it's all over the place and there's so much saturation these days, and some records are so loud and some are so dynamic, and you know, it's just it's all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part. Yeah. I mean, and your idea of what Steely Dan sounds like might be good, and I might listen to it and go like, this sounds awful. You know, like it's
right.
It's hard to chase a quality thing, which is why, you know, I mentioned when I get a mix and I hear the rough, like that's sort of my Bible. That's my
I was predicting Bible when you said that. I was like, oh yeah, I totally feel
like that's because that's all I have. Like that's the benchmark for what I have to make, quote unquote, better. Which I don't even like the term better because it's better. I have to make it better, but it's just the idea of like, how can I make whatever this vibe, whatever this rough is doing, as good or as bad as it may be, like what story is it telling, and how can I make that translate in a way that is going to be received to the listener in a way that isn't going to make them want to skip it or whatever that may be. So, you know, that's why I don't, you know, listen to Music Friday and like judge the mixes as much as I just judge the song and the emotion of it.
So when you're mixing a song, you're referencing the rough, but you're not necessarily referencing another song that it might, you know, sit in a similar ballpark to. You're just only with the song and making it better.
Pretty much. I mean, occasionally, like the artist or producer will say like, hey, we were going for this style thing. We were going for like a Katy Perry Teenage Dream vibe thing. And then in that case, I'll be like, okay, let's hear it. And I'll listen to Katy Perry Teenage Dream. And the reason I mean, you know, I'll appease them for that. But the reason I don't maybe put too much value in it is because like what they were perceiving about that record might be wildly different than what it actually was. You know, like so many times people are like, oh, I was going for this type of thing. And then you hear their song and their song's cool and great, but it's not nearly like sonically what they thought they were doing. You know, they were perceiving, oh, well, like the singer's voice kind of sounds like Katy Perry, or the song's about teenagers, you know? And now they're telling me like, hey, we want a Teenage Dream type thing. And I'm like, okay, that, you know, well, they have like the subs feels like this and the kick's really big. But really the reason they're telling me that is totally different. Like they don't, like if I were to turn the kick up and change their rough so much that it actually sounded like Teenage Dream, it would just be, I would miss the point, you know?
Right.
So I always listen to it a little bit, but at the end of the day, yeah, it's just
you take it with a grain of salt. Take it, you know.
Pretty much. I like to listen to get inside their head to some extent, you know, like there's value in that, I think. But yeah, it's apples and oranges, you know, like all you can do is work with what you have in front of you. And for me, that's the rough mix and what the files are doing. So that's usually my approach.
Yeah. Well, you kind of mentioned that you're very like, you know, combing the individual tracks with a fine comb as opposed to kind of starting with the stereo bus and working your way down.
Yeah.
Well, what are your thoughts on like stereo bus compression, stereo bus processing? Are you kind of like trying to get every element to be individually locked and not glue it, you know, at the top, or like what's your thought process there?
Yeah, pretty much exactly that. I'm not doing a ton of like mix bus stuff. I'll do maybe like some over big picture like tone shaping, like maybe an EQ that's just doing like 1 dB here and there. And then from there, it's just about sort of loudness, to be totally honest. Like it's just about sort of saturating it in a way, or just getting it up to like a sort of aggressive forward level out of the mix bus. But I'm not doing any compression on the mix bus. I'm not really doing any EQ that does maybe a little bit here and there. Not a big fan of like mid-side or anything. Like nothing destructive really, just sort of additive stuff. So like I'll do some saturation. I mean, destructive is I am limiting the mix bus obviously just to get it to some level. But other than that, it's usually just like some color that truthfully, if you were to take away, wouldn't make or break the record. Yeah, that's my approach to mix bus. I used to do way more, but it just, I don't know, it just got to the point where, again, a lot of times mixes are so dialed that it doesn't even need it, or it feels smaller sometimes if you start slamming it with different compressors and whatnot. Yeah, I've honestly, I mean, I compress a fair amount, but not as much as maybe some people would think a mixer would compress. I don't know.
Well, saturation seems to do a lot of the density thing that people kind of talk about, right? Of like making a sound bigger without necessarily compressing it more.
Sometimes it can make it feel smaller. Being selective in kind of what you're saturating and why, I think is important. Just saturating for the sake of saturating, I don't think is always necessarily the answer. But yeah, I mean, sometimes there's no saturation on my mix bus, and sometimes it's just like straight limiting, and like the record's already there. And I obviously have other like sub buses that lead to that, and there's like console sort of saturation type stuff on that. But yeah, definitely just not like a top down sort of guy. It's just not the way I go about things.
I had a guy on the show named Brian Bender, and he was saying that like the reason why I never compress the stereo bus is because like it just fucks up all the different time things that I've done with all the other compressors. So like, how, let's say the drums are compressing fast and the vocal is compressing slow, or the other way around or whatever. And then you just shove it all into one compressor at like, 10 milliseconds and, whatever, fast release on the SSL or whatever. And you're just completely screwed up all those little miniature time differences that you've already made with the individual compressors before that.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you? Is that something that you're thinking about?
I'm not specific. I mean, yes, sort of. I mean, again, I'm just not like a top, like I think people who are doing heavy mix bus compression stuff like that are a top down sort of person where they're already mixing into an SSL compressor or something like that that's already taking off a good amount of stuff, and it's gluing the mix for sure. But what they're doing is they're slamming it, and then they're going back and making all those smaller decisions in the mix where it's like, okay, great, I'm compressing, I got about the amount of dB I want it coming off, whatever. Like it glues it and does like a gushy thing is kind of the way I can hear that sort of compression on a mix bus. But then they're pushing and pulling within the mix. So that's when you would dial in your mix bus your drum bus compression. That's when you would dial in like your vocal compression. That's when you'd start to EQ stuff to get it to push and pull within what you're already doing on the mix bus. If you take that mix bus compressor off later, it's destroyed, which in today's day and age is really hard because everybody needs stems. Everybody even needs multi-tracks nowadays. So anytime you're really doing a lot of heavy lifting on the mix bus, your whole mix is going to fall apart if you need the stems or if you need control later.
Yes, absolutely.
Some people care about that and some people don't, but it's becoming more and more of a thing. Like to go back to the Atmos thing, like you were saying, like everybody wants recallable multi-tracks. They don't even want stems anymore. They want multi-tracks, which is crazy. And makes sort of an issue because even like bus processing, even like drum bus processing, if you're doing a heavy lifting thing on that, like your multi-tracks don't line up and they don't sound like the mix. So
right.
It's a weird time for sort of like
deliverables. That's nuts. That's nuts.
Yeah, if you talk to people who are like working for label stuff and delivering like label stuff, they want usually the committed multi-tracks because the labels then are going to take those and have like somebody for Atmos mix them.
Oh my gosh.
And when they pull it up and for Atmos, they want it to at least be as close to the mix as possible. So yeah, it's weird. And I mean, I'm not specifically doing it for that reason. It's just sort of the way that I've always liked to work in some extent. So it's convenient that now I could, just commit to everything and like it's there. But yeah, a lot of people I know their workflows have been changing for that reason because
that's super interesting. The formats are changing the way people work.
Correct. Well, even think about like the format of Atmos, right? Like you really can't even use mix bus compression on Atmos, like there is no mix bus on Atmos.
Well, right. Atmos is more dynamic, right? It's like
it's more dynamic. Yeah.
It's like minus 16, I think defaulted, right? Like LUFS or something.
I don't know specifically anything about it, to be totally honest. But
Yeah, I don't know much either.
My point just being like the final deliverable of Atmos is a multi-track.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying? So like, how do you deliver a multi-track and be like, oh, yeah, I have compression on the mix bus. Like mix bus is something that can only happen to a 2-track file, you know?
Right.
So there's ways that guys are getting around that, and they're gluing their Atmos stuff by using crazy like side chaining methods. But at the end of the day, it's not a 2-track deliverable anymore. So it works differently.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. The format, I say a lot to say like the format changes kind of the way we work sometimes. Yeah.
For sure. Wow. I haven't thought about it like quite like that before. One of the things that I don't like about Atmos in terms of, I've only heard it binaurally, so I can't really speak for having listened in a real Atmos environment. So the judgment is still out for me. Like I don't know because I haven't done it. I'm sure it's amazing. I know it's amazing in movie theaters and stuff. But like what I didn't like binaurally was how the low end, it just doesn't slap in Atmos the way it slaps in stereo. And I think a lot of that is phasing issues, like phase coherency. And, but also maybe it has to do with that like stereo bus thing that we get to do in stereo mixes that just completely gets taken apart in an Atmos rig because it's not loud. And that the thing that we like about low end slapping is that loudness thing sometimes.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's a part of the issue as well. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a new platform. It's a new way of consuming that we've never done before. Like imagine going from mono to stereo. Like you're like,
exactly.
I don't know. There's too many things to focus on now. I can't think, there's definitely a learning process. And there's a learning process even in like how to make art for that medium. So I think we're still in that process where like everybody's like, oh, I don't know, I could do whatever I could do. Like just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. Like the early Beatles records where like the drums and bass are on the left, and we're definitely in that era. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. But yeah, currently it's still a very unnatural way to listen to music because, we're not used to hearing things coming at us from all over the place. So it's weird. And you definitely have to hear it in like an Atmos room. Again, I haven't spent much time with any of this stuff, but I mean, I've heard Atmos rooms and they are, they're worth having a conversation about more than anything that on headphones is. Like the headphone thing I also just hate headphones in general. So I don't understand headphones even in a stereo aspect, like how to listen on headphones. So like throwing binaural wannabe Atmos pseudo whatever down mix stuff in there, so confusing to me.
Right. Yeah. I actually spoke with Bobby Osinski, who's like one of the, the OGs of like audio interviewers and stuff. And I asked him like, do you really think this is happening? And he said like, not until there's like newer technology that allows people to kind of more easily place speakers around a space, because it's until you get over the spouse problem of like, why are you putting all these speakers there? You're not gonna
spouse problem,
like you're not gonna be able to convince people to just kind of do this in any kind of environment or car environment, or you know what I mean. We need like better technology in terms of like speakers to make it. To make it.
I mean, we're moving to headphones. Like we're gonna have headphones strapped to our heads for the rest of infinity probably. So I think it's more to me about making things on headphones sound more realistic and spatial, I guess.
We'll have to see what happens.
Which is getting there, man. Like I did like the Wave stuff, how they do like they have their like NX, whatever it is that like you could be in a room and it's pretty crazy. It's getting close, man. Like cuz they have like the ones where they model studios that like your speakers.
Kind of like also like the Slate VSX or whatever.
Okay, Slate does that too. Yeah, I forgot.
No, but I think Waves has one also, the NX.
Yeah, Waves. I wrote an article for them a few years back that was on that, and they have like the head tracking thing and whatnot. And I haven't listened to it recently, and I'm sure they put out new ones since then, or even the Slate or whatever. But when I listened to it back then, I was like, man, if I close my eyes, and I think like it's pretty close, it's pretty crazy, and like give it 5 more years, like you give technology like that just a little more time, and it's gonna be pretty crazy. It's definitely the way we're moving, I think, to some extent. So. We'll see. I don't know what the future looks like, and
for now, you're
hard to,
still mixing stereo. So
totally. I mean, it's been on my never-ending to-do list to like spend some time in Logic because they have like all the Atmos stuff built into it that you can kind of do the spatial thing. So I was going to play around with that and see what it looks like. But yeah, I'm sticking to the stereo thing for now. Yeah, you know, it feels. Here's my one take on Atmos, I guess. Like, it just feels like it's in like the money grab stage currently still, where like everybody is trying to get the upper hand just to say that they did, or just to like future proof themselves, which, you know, in this industry, I don't blame anybody for doing, but that's just kind of where I'm at with it, where like the only reason I would get into it would be fear-based of like, if I don't do this, I'm not going to have a career in 5 years. Because it's also just not something I'm passionate about at all. Like, I don't get it. I don't really enjoy listening to it on headphones or anything. So like, it's hard for me to like want to spend all this time to like learn about it and do more things with it when at the base of it, I just don't care. Yeah. Unfortunately.
You're happy
its current state.
At this state, you're still happy with the way stereo mixes make you feel and translate. And
totally. Yeah. I mean, I think there's still a long ways that has to happen with that, even of people getting better at making music in stereo, you know, which is the funny part. You know, we're adding all these speakers and people are still, you know, on the forums asking how to make their bass sound better, so, you know, on stereo. So we're jumping ahead a little bit, but, you know, that's how it goes.
Well, you talked about like, you know, getting really fast in mixing and, you know, how the technology is getting so good in the box. Is there anything particular that you found that's like, I don't know, either helped you work faster or better or smarter, you know, maybe since the last time we spoke?
No, more reps.
Just more reps.
I'm the worst person to talk about like tools or plugins or anything, just because I still use the stuff I used when I was 15 or 16. Like I
saw you posted recently, like I basically used the old Waves bundle, the Pro Q3, and that's it.
It's quite literally all I use. Yeah. I mean, I'll try and like push myself every once in a while to be like, all right, let me buy a new plugin and see if I could implement this in my session. And I just never really do. Like nothing sticks, you know, just because I kind of found my way and it works. And I use, you know, a decent amount of like SSL kind of channel strip type stuff, FabFilter Pro Q, the old school Waves, just like Renaissance stuff. It just is fine. Like it works. It's good. It's what I know. You know,
what about
deharshifying
deharshifying stuff like Soothe or I guess like maybe dynamic EQ kind of stuff?
Yeah, I use stuff like that. I'm a big like multi-band compressor guy. I'll use that to like fix stuff a lot of times. Soothe's cool. Soothe's cool. The newer one is like the first Soothe I think was complete snake oil garbage, but the second one's got more controls on it, and the attack and release knobs on that are sort of the magic to me. Yeah, I mean I use it on every mix. Like I'm not going to sit here and act like I don't use it. I mean I use it. It's part of my vocal chain and whatnot. So it does a thing. I mean it's a cool tool, but could I mix a record without it? Definitely. You know.
Yeah.
It's almost one of those things where it's like I'm forcing myself to use it in a way that probably is making more problems for me, you know? It's probably making things more phasey and washy sounding that I'm like then trying to fix later, you know? So,
right.
But no, I mean, there's some great tools out there. I mean, the Isotope stuff, you know, is constantly pushing the boundaries as far as like what you can do as far as saving audio or cleaning it up or,
oh my God.
You know, so I mean, I'm not against new innovations, but I just feel like there's a lot of tools that are just being rebranded and done in different ways. And I already have a million EQs. Like I don't need another EQ that sounds a little different. I don't know. That's just the way I go about that type of thing.
Yeah. Who needs another 1176, you know?
Yeah. Well, there is a market for 1176s, I feel like, in the plugin world, because I'm trying to get away from using UAD stuff as much. And I don't think anybody has 1176 that's quite as good. So if anybody listening has something they like, let me know. But I can't find another Blue Stripe that does the thing that the UAD one does. So.
All right. Well, I don't have any UAD plugins, so so I don't know. I'm not the point of comparison here, but
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, there's something about it.
I feel that.
But at the end of the day, it's a tool that, you know, is minutely different than something else that serves a purpose, you know? So,
And you can get to wherever you want to go in either of those, right? Like you could drive to work in a Camry, or you could drive to work in a Honda or whatever. Both get you there.
It's definitely about the way that you know how to use one more comfortably than the other, you know? So, and that's why I stick to what works for me. You know, I have my plugin repertoire and it works and it's quick and it makes sense and I know how to navigate it. You know, you put me on that's why like sometimes I get sessions from other people where they don't commit to their plugins and I just open it up and can like tweak or whatever. And that's always hard for me because A, I don't know how to use the tools that they're using, and B, I don't know how to, I'm not in their mind, so I don't know how they're using that tool in that way. So it's really this sort of thing where it's like I'm trying to like reverse engineer stuff, and it's always a hard thing to do, you know?
Right. Yeah. Artists, commit to your sounds, okay?
Yeah. Well, it's like going to a kitchen, you know, that you don't usually work in, and then you're like looking for the silverware and you're like frustrated the whole time because it's not your kitchen. Like you don't know where your, you know, things are. That's just like muscle memory at that point. But
yeah. The truth is I always start kind of my mixes from the ground up. I don't take sessions from other people. And when I do, it always just throws me off. Like if I'll get a session that I have to like take to the next level, I'm inevitably going to mess something up and get into like a tail chasing moment of like, oh, so I kind of put my like stereo bus processing on and now something's distorting and it's weird. And like all these things, I'll just end up having to start from scratch in the end anyways. I've never been able to kind of take a project from somebody and then, you know, inside the session that they, with their routing and their kind of logic, it just messes with me.
It's a different part of your brain for sure. But I mean, there's value in it because sometimes you can save stuff in its more purest form than like having people commit and then you have to like put things back that were taken away, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, if the overheads are just, you know, high passed, you know, all the way up to 700 hertz, and then I decide in the mix phase that I actually want the bottom, like I'm not adding that back later, you know? I need their session to take that filter off. So,
it's an interesting example.
Well, I mean, sometimes that happens, you know, and like if I just get the files and everything's committed, like it just is what it is with the files at that point. But if I had their session, I could be like, oh, look, your drum sounds way better just because I have all the information down there and I just took your one plugin off. Like I undid what you did. So it's helpful in those instances sometimes. But yeah,
there's also
that's why the relationship thing's important in what I do. Because I mean, sometimes if I were to take a session from somebody, it would become a mess and it would be weird and I wouldn't know. But other people, you know, I know how they work. I've gotten sessions from them before. Like, I don't want them to commit to what they're doing type of thing, you know, like, please give me your sessions so that I could take all the weird phasey, like micro shift plugins that you have on every, you know, track off and your record already sounds better because, you know, you were just in the heat of the moment, like working and producing, that you just started slapping, you know, your vocal chain on everything that maybe didn't need that everywhere. So, but again, you find that out over years of collaborating and working with different people and, you know, and that changes, you know, that's relatively new for me. 2 years ago, I probably wasn't really getting many sessions from people, whereas now I probably get, you know, I have like 2 or 3 producers I work with that I get sessions from. So,
yeah. Would you say that you're a minimalist in the mixing department? Because it seems like you want less is more for you, is what I'm gathering.
Definitely. I mean, and I think less is more sounds better, you know? Like, I think that's the biggest issue with the way music sounds nowadays is people are just mangling sounds so much that nothing sounds full, you know, in a weird way. Like, even just EQ, man, like FabFilter Pro Q, I think is like the best and worst thing ever because the second, like, I'm not a big purist as far as phase shift with EQs and everything. Like, I don't fully understand the science, but it does, man. If you start like notching here, pushing here, EQing that, and you have this like FabFilter plugin that looks like a science experiment, you're messing with the like legitimacy of the foundation of that sonic sound. And you have that strewn across every single track in your mix. Like, you're just losing like so much solid, it starts
Clarity.
pushing and clarity. Yeah, clarity. You lose so much clarity. And that's why I say sometimes I get sessions and I literally take their plugins off and I'm like, this already sounds better, because you're not pushing and pulling a million like tiny little notches that, maybe is an issue. Maybe there is a weird resonance at 2K and we take that away. But like there's cleaner ways to fix that resonance at 2K. You could boost the low end, or you could turn the track down so that the resonance is quieter, but boost top end so that it's brighter and comes forward. Or, like there's less intrusive ways than throwing soothe on everything and, being like, oh yeah, look, it sounds better. There's better, more like purist, for lack of a better term, like ways to manipulate audio that allows the sounds to keep their integrity.
Yes.
So that's what I like. And yeah, anytime that I get a session, I'm always trying to stop myself from adding more plugins. I'm always looking at what I have and being like, can I fix this with just like a fader move? Can it like be a volume thing? Or can it be just like a big, broad, wideband EQ rather than like a million notches? Or can it be, I'm just always looking for the sort of purest, less intrusive way to fix a problem.
Yeah, I love that. It's like almost like a mastering engineer approach. And I think just like there's a cautionary lesson for the audience of like, it's amazing what we can do with our tools, and we should try things and see if it works. But then sometimes you got to just see what it sounds like without having done what it did, and maybe it sounds even better before, and you maybe went too far. And you need to like, I know I sometimes need to do this of like, just check myself. Did all those moves I just made, did they actually make it sound better? And sometimes, the first 2 plugins did, and then the last 4 didn't, or, whatever.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was. And I was talking with another guy in Nashville recently named Brent Hendrich, and he was telling me, he's like, you just got to sometimes leave some of that nasty stuff in. Like the gnarly stuff is part of the sound, and that's what makes it, less is more. Like let it be that sound, because
sometimes you hyper focus on that. Like that's an issue I get a lot of times. It's like sometimes it's just like an issue with a mix, whether it's just the way the vocal was recorded or even just whatever. Maybe it's not even a big issue, but for some reason my mind hears that and I can't unhear, like whether it be like the sibilant vocal or something that like you almost always overcompensate. Those records that I'm like, when I hear the rough and I'm like, oh, it's a sibilant vocal, I always overcompensate. And a lot of times I hear it after the fact and I'm like, oh, I should have just let that be a little more sibilant. Like I went way overboard cutting all the sibilants just because I was like insecure about that. And that was the first thing my ear like was drawn to. But now I overcompensated and now I made it worse, technically, probably.
But I think this is like a hump that I'm at with my mixing is like, because I know what something should sound like, or I understand what's sounding bad, and maybe I can figure out a way to fix it for almost all the issues. Sometimes that gets in the way of you just like lose the emotional kind of thing that should be the thing that's really guiding your mixing, and you let the technician brain take over, and it's an inhibitor from like just letting the record just be and live and feel and breathe and emote.
Yeah. Which again is why, like, to me, the rough is the Bible, even as sibilant or as weird as sometimes that may be. Like, sometimes that's the magic of the record, that's, it's about taming it and keeping it, in check in a way. But if you get rid of so much of that stuff, it falls apart.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely minimalist, definitely always like interested in trying to just keep the integrity of the sound as much as possible without just destroying, things. So
yeah, man, I love this. This is great. This is an important conversation, and people should listen to this segment, or at least I'm preaching to myself of like something that I need to listen to more and think about more. I think this is a great opportunity to jump over to the sauce segment.
The sauce,
the new segment since you were last on the show. Like this didn't even exist back on episode 33. So you sent me a song called "Sad Girl Thing" by Zoe X. So let's have a listen to that for about 90 seconds and chat about it. Sound cool?
Yeah.
Yeah, Josh, sounds awesome. I
Thanks,
love the
man.
synth bass that kind of is like, very dynamic and kind of builds up in volume. And
Yeah,
yeah, and her voice sounds awesome, like just super lush and not harsh, but great. Yeah,
yeah.
tell me, and in the low end when it finally comes in, knocks. Yeah, tell me a bit about that song. What
Thanks,
went
man.
into it?
Yeah, it's a fun one. I like that tune a lot, actually. What went into it? I mean, the producer Matt Harris, who produced it, killer producer already. So I mean, that's a mix that kind of comes in dialed already, and then from there it's just polish and there's definitely some artistic things that I did in there that are like my stamp, let's say, that I think are cool. But yeah, it was to me. I think my approach to that was again just improving upon the rough. Really like kind of chiseling those edges and just sharpening the focus of some stuff. Making sure that the bass does feel nice when it comes in, and that it is all the things. The vocal is dialed,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean it's that pop sound, so it's got to just be right there the whole time. Um, yeah. So I mean, I think the two things that I did on that I guess they're maybe fun. They're like me playing, I guess, a little bit like playing and having fun with it. Is like towards the end there goes to like a down chorus before like the whole thing kind of blows up, and I'm kind of obsessed with this plugin. It's called Lossy by the Gigahertz, the Goodhertz stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's something just so nostalgic about that plugin. And like this song is very like Zoe stuff's like very like Y2K aesthetic, like very like early 2000s,
Okay.
that sort of type thing. So that plugin to me, Lossy, is super cool because it just sounds like a bad cell phone. It sounds like like a razor flip phone, like voicemail type vibe.
Oh boy.
And for like the down chorus, I put that on the vocal, and it just sort of tied it together. Of just kind of sounds like that sort of thing.
Nice.
And then also another thing that I do that's kind of fun is like there's delay throws kind of all throughout the song. I think maybe it's just in the second verse. I forget. But a lot of times, what I'll do is instead of just like delay throwing, let's say like the last word of like a verse, I'll actually pull stuff from later in the song and use that as like a delay throw. So I'm almost like making fake ad libs that don't exist there. I don't know. It's kind of like a weird thing that I do occasionally, but it sometimes helps to story tell a little bit more, or it kind of helps to like foreshadow or like finish the thought. Sometimes I feel like, like a songwriter might write something and then at the end of the line, it makes sense to like come back to like something else. So I'd have to hear it in this song, but I think it was something like, she's talking about, how hard something is. And then like the song is like sad. I'm just a sad girl. So it's like, I put the, you take the, I'm just a sad girl. I'm just a sad girl and put it after a line about like how hard life is. And it makes more sense than just repeating how hard life is again.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm always thinking about in mixes. And again, that's sort of my like quote unquote way to play around and maybe like further the storytelling a little bit or even foreshadow. Like I've been known to take like a delay throw from like later in the song and make it the intro, like put it in like the intro instead of just like a ambient phasey intro. Like I'll put like a little filtered vocal in there so you get a hint for like what the song is already before it even starts. And again, sometimes producers want that gone. Like that's their art. They don't want my idea of what a vocal chop should be. Sometimes they love it. So, you kind of take a risk on that sort of thing. But that's kind of where I like songs that are already dialed sonically because I don't have to spend so much time like pushing and pulling and getting everything balanced. Like a mix like this already comes to me balanced. Like the rough is balanced. I'm not trying to like reinvent the wheel here. It just leaves time for me to have those instances where I can really push the song forward by telling a story.
You're not
a
just
more.
the fix-it mixer. You're the creative mixer at that point.
Correct. And then and again, sometimes people don't want the creative mixer, and that's totally cool. Like, it's definitely not always the most fun when you put these like creative ideas in and somebody comes back and you're like, get rid of them because it's like, oh, well, that was my art. But at the end of the day, like that's totally an ego thing. Like, so I'm always just like, yep, you're right. Like we'll get rid of that delay throw.
Do you kind of like give them like a heads up, like, yo, check, I've added this thing. Let me know if you think if it's cool or whatever. Or do you kind of just let them discover it?
Sometimes it's people that I haven't worked with before and I'm, insecure in the fact that like, oh man, I don't want them to be like, what did he do here? But other times I'm just like, let it be a surprise. Let's see what they say.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have a working relationship with the person, then it's like, especially then it's like, oh, I was looking for someone like that. I didn't even know.
Well, sometimes people expect it, at a certain point. Like once you start doing it, they're kind of like, they'll maybe send me stuff that's a little more stripped back. They won't do all their normal delay throws because they know that they'll trust that I'll do them. And that's always cool. So I appreciate that. But yeah, again, it comes back to the relationship side of things, of just like knowing that and working with certain people. And yeah, there's certain producers who I know when they send me something, like they don't want my opinion of where delay throws should be. They don't want my opinion of what I think should happen. And there's other times when I'll just straight up mute a track and like, I worked on a mix today that I just got notes back on, and it's like, I muted for verse 2. I was like, we don't need claps here. I just like muted the claps for the first half. And then when they came back, I like put delay on them so that they were like more interesting, and it pushed the energy forward. But I mean, I totally changed their production by doing that,
For sure.
Sometimes I'll even like, I might have done this one on the Zoe tune, but sometimes on the delay throws, I'll even tune them differently so that like it finishes the phrase. So if it doesn't, let's say, end on the note that I think it should end on, to like resolve the whole like delay throw phrase, I'll tune it down, just like a single note.
Right. That's smart. I like that.
Certain things to just, it's like faking ad libs that weren't there. It's again, me taking a producer hat a little bit and making, certain ideas. But yeah, that's my sauce. That's
like
all
that.
the secrets I have. As far as mixing, that's all the secrets I have.
No,
I tune delay
great.
throws, and I put delay throws where they shouldn't be sometimes.
Yeah. You don't have to take the sauce that literally, but it's just like a fun little segment to kind of get people to kind of.
I know.
Yeah, but it's nice for like people to kind of hear what you're working on after they hear you talk about it for a while.
Yeah,
and it's my buddy told me you should start doing segments. I was like, yeah, that probably would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, well, that's like, I even love the like Pensado, how he does like the batter's box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Cool. I've been told to do more segments, but I don't know if I want to do more segments. Maybe one day.
It's TikTok viral, man. You could do segments and they could go viral on TikTok, and you could.
Yeah, maybe that would be helpful for my career. I don't know. We'll think about it. But
brings the whole conversation full circle where we started.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I had another question based on what you were kind of saying of like,
cool.
How people, they leave you to kind of do some of those creative things because they know you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Did Sam master this song?
Sam did master that song, yes.
So I have a question for you based on having interviewed Sam also.
Okay.
Because Sam kind of talked about how people don't really know what mixes sound like because we're all referencing masters, right? When we're mixing, we're referencing masters. But when we get to the mastering engineer, like they've heard mixes, they know what mixes sound like. So what are you leaving for Sam to kind of do at the very end that you haven't necessarily ticked off your to-do list on the mix? What's the in-between?
I don't know. You should ask him.
Well, what did you hear? What did you hear back?
I don't like to do that. I don't really A/B like the mix versus the master. Like I just have a relationship with Sam or whatnot.
And you trust him. Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, like again, I think you get to a certain point, like it's rare that I get a mix back that I'm like, what happened here? But like also, like my mixes are masters, like I'll deliver at the end of it all, I call it ref master, and then I'll take my final like gain stage limiter or two off. But again, I'm not a top down guy, so my mix doesn't really change. All I'm killing is some headroom with that final limiter. So my mix is already pretty like baked. So, stuff coming back from Sam might just dial the low end a little more, or just take a little bit of low end away so that we can get more loudness, or, but it's rare that I feel like Sam's actually doing any heavy lifting on like where I leave things at. Maybe a little bit of like just a frequency rebalance type thing, or, he's big into just making sure the low end is sort of blown out and big. And, that kind of brings some energy and whatnot. So, I guess to answer your question, like I make my mixes sound like a master. Like I'm not like making my mix sound like a mix. Like I need to make it sound like a master, because I know when I send a mix away, they're going to play it next to Spotify stuff. They're going to be jamming Spotify on their phone. They're going to be listening to whatever it is. I'm going to send them a mix at, 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. and they're going to go like, oh yes, awesome, the mix. And they're going to pull open their phone and they're going to play it immediately after they just played Justin Bieber. So if it doesn't slap next to Justin Bieber coming off Spotify, I failed. Like they're going to be like, yeah, I don't know. Like, so I have to make it sound like a master.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure Sam has a wildly different answer for that. But his thing, which I also agree with and love about Sam in general. I mean, again, relationship wise, like Sam and I've been working together for years, but it's the peace of mind. Like knowing Sam mastered it is so much more peace of mind than going to somebody else who I'm like, I just don't have a relationship with you. Like, I just don't know. Like I would trust that if something were wrong with the files, Sam would call me, or I trust that, Sam's done everything and he knows my style and he knows what I do and he knows not to.
Totally.
He knows not to go in there and manipulate to death. Like he knows the mix was intentional and that if there is distortion in a certain spot, it was probably intentional or whatever it may be. So it's the peace of mind behind it all. I don't think he's like heavy lifting. Maybe he is. I don't know.
Yeah.
It would be a fun two-way conversation to have. And
so
see what
if
his
Sam
response,
so if Sam is listening to this conversation, then Sam can kind of give us a retort or something, and I'll share it in the Instagram stories or something.
He's always like weird to ask about that too, because I will sometimes like listen to his master in A/B, and I'm always just like, "What did you do? Like, it doesn't sound like you did anything, but it's better. Like you didn't change anything. Like maybe there's some more low end or something, but like it's better." And his answer is always like, I just boosted dB here. So like there is some like weird magic.
It's just the Oxford inflator. That's it.
Probably. Well, it's like you said earlier too. Like part of it's just the perspective. Like it's a totally different perspective for me to like hit download from Sam's master and hit play than it is for me to like hit play on my own mix. It might just be the different file name. It might just be that, but it's psychologically like, oh yeah, this is better because it says Moses mastered on it.
I think it's because you've checked out of the in progress mindset of like, oh, you know what? Oh, now that I've listened back again, maybe I will like boost the vocal in that one spot, or maybe I will like, maybe I'll try to get rid of some resonance in the bass or whatever, something. And then when you hear a master, you're just trying to like see, what's the gestalt? Does it feel good as a whole? Like, you're not in that like there's something else to mess with because the mix is over.
It's all psychological. It's all psychological. And that's again relationship thing. Like that's why I know how to deliver a mix to one person versus another. Like it's psychological. Like you have to kind of walk people through it. Sometimes you have to explain a little bit of like, hey, this is going to sound different than the rough, but like, I think it feels great. Like, I love it. It does this, like, because you have to set psychologically people up for a mix sometimes, or sometimes, you're just kind of navigating the emotions of like, there's a million things they were worried about, or this is the first time they've ever sent something to mix. So they don't know what to expect. Like, so that's why having the relationship's important. And,
it's a relationship business. Like,
absolutely.
Everyone, people are so used to sitting in their man/woman cave, and you know what I mean? Like people forget that there's a whole world out there of of other people that we need to connect with, and that's really the secret of like everybody who like went to like audio school. They say that the only thing, the biggest thing they got out of it at least was making connections that helped them down the line. You know what I mean? It wasn't the actual education; it was the relationship thing.
Yeah. And, I mean, the hard part is because you immediately start throwing words like connections around, and then it's like, you missed the point, like, and that's the hard part that I think so many people who are greens like get into this thing too. And they immediately like enter relationships with that mindset of like, oh, this is a connection. This is going to do something for me. This is going to,
Right. For sure.
And that's such a bad place to be in. And I mean, I'm guilty of it, like we all are, but because that's like a scarcity mindset type thing, I think, where it's like, oh yeah, I just need something from this person and that's going to help me go forward. And
right.
And yeah, so I think getting out of that and just getting into the idea of just, no, like I just like you as a person and I think your art's great and like we're doing this together and we're navigating the emotions around like, oh, you're worried about X, Y, and Z. Well, like I'm sure that it's not. Like, do you trust me? Okay. Like, so yeah, that's my rant on connections.
Totally.
Well, not connections, but relationships. But yeah, that's what makes the music go around.
Absolutely. Yeah, dude, this has been so much fun to catch up again. And as the thank you for coming once again on the show.
Absolutely.
As we draw it to a close, I know you already answered the final question of the show of patience being the thing you would tell your earlier self or tell people coming up. But just to ask you a little bit about creative juices and staying inspired. We all have days where we're super hyped to get in the studio, and then there's days where we're a little less hyped to get in the studio. And you may have answered this question. I don't even know if I asked you back in the day, but maybe it's a habit or routine or it could be anything that kind of helps you stay jazzed to do the work you do and energized and happy to do what you do.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a few answers, I guess. But like the first one, I mean, still comes back to just the relationships, like, again, it's fresh in my mind, but like last night, it was just so like life-giving to like do revisions, over audio movers and like have fun. And like, I just came out of that, like being like, oh man, this is so great. This is fun. We collaborated, we had some good ideas. We nerded out on some music. Like we're both stoked on where this song sounds like that to me is like the joy of like, oh man, I couldn't wake up today to do this interview. Like that type of thing. I'm going to mix a record after this, but it's like, that's almost secondary to just like the connection of having this conversation. And knowing people are going to be listening to this conversation is awesome too. But that's definitely part of it. But I'm also a big routine person. So, knowing my routine of getting up and working and that, that keeps me, I think, grounded more than, let's say, like inspired. But then also just, I'm a big sort of person where I think everything influences everything. So, even if it's like the TV show that I'm watching like later tonight, or, if I'm browsing YouTube or listening to podcasts, like I try not to listen to them strictly from a consumerist point of view, but also just from like an inspiration. Like, how can I use this sort of idea or knowledge, or even just if it is a mindless TV show, like this makes me feel a certain way. I wonder why, like, and poking and prodding at those sort of ideas of, why does this feel sad to me right now, in this show that I'm watching? Is it cinematically dark and dreary, or is it the music playing, or is it the actors, or is it the dialogue? So using that as inspiration, and then, thinking in depth in a way like that when I'm sitting down to mix as well. Like it's kind of a muscle that I try and flex and think through a lot. So, yeah, I guess just everything keeps me inspired, really. And then I also just try and not do the things that I don't like to do, which sounds bad, but getting rid of things that don't bring me energy as much as possible kind of keeps things moving forward and fresh too.
Yeah, like ain't nobody got time for taxes,
Well, I mean, I hire somebody, like
exactly.
It costs money, but I hire somebody. Or like back to the assistant thing, like prepping isn't always the most fun thing. So I pay somebody to do it for me, and that just keeps... And not everybody has that luxury. Like that took me, again, 10 years to be able to afford an accountant, and 10 years to be able to afford somebody who I could pay to, assist on certain things. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what keeps my creative juices flowing. And also, like, if I'm not feeling inspired some days, I'll just be like, I'll mix that record tomorrow. Like if I like had a busy morning or something and I get to the studio and I'm just like, my brain's all flustered. Like I keep a flexible enough schedule that I could be like, you know what? I'm not going to do my best work today. I'll do it tomorrow. And I think that's sort of important too, where you don't necessarily force yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you could easily fall into just like a place of laziness, I think, in that. But I think I have a healthy enough relationship with that side of how I work that I could just be like, you know what? I'm not working today. I'm not mixing a record,
Yeah.
And then I come back tomorrow and I do 2 in a day and I'm stronger than ever. So
yeah, it's so important to remember that rest is just as important as activity. And like, it's like a silly analogy, but like music isn't just the notes that you're playing. It's also the space in between the notes. As like a bass player, like when you stop your note from ringing is almost as important as when it began. Actually, Damian Taylor, who was on the show, who he's worked with like Bjork, guy's like an inspiration, and he was telling me how he thinks of going to sleep as like pulling the arrow back for the next day to be really really, a good arrow shot or whatever. But the idea is that like nighttime is the beginning of the next day, as opposed to nighttime being the end of this day, which was a very big aha moment for me. And funnily, in Judaism, the days start at night, right? Like the Jewish Sabbath starts at night, which was like a fun connection for me. But yeah, it's like we really got to remember that like if we're not doing our best right now, taking a break might be the best thing to do. And it's hard because I think of myself as like, coming from like Jewish New York, where there's like a hustle mentality and like a productivity mentality, and like we get so much of our juices from just being productive and feeling like we're busy or whatever, to like realize that's actually really stupid. And I'm trying so hard to not have that be a measure of success in my day of, I felt busy today. And it's a real thing I struggle with, and I think a lot of New Yorkers do, and maybe a lot of Americans do. It's that capitalistic productivity busyness thing,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's stages in life. Like, I mean, I am coming out of a stage of that in my life where like for the past many years, I would work all day long. I'd go to sleep. I'd work all day the next day, and like, I just neglected my life to that point, like I didn't even have a fulfilling life because I just was only productive, like being productive all the time isn't fulfilling. And I think you kind of have to learn that the hard way, unfortunately, sometimes, of burning out or putting yourself in a situation where it like harms you to some extent, for you to realize like, oh, I was missing out on friends and family. I was missing out on like just sitting on my porch and enjoying the nice weather outside. I was missing out on taking walks, so you could scream that in people's faces as much as you want, but I think a lot of times the like hustle work culture, like you have to reach the rock bottom for it to like actually matter to some people. At least for me, that's what happened to me, is like I had to reach like a pretty painful rock bottom for me to be like, oh, okay, well, yep, that was fun while it lasted, but like that's not reality for the rest of my life, like working that much. So and I work more efficient and better now because of it, because I took the rest. And when you have that rest, like you're right, I can be way more focused now, and it puts things into perspective. So
thanks for sharing that. It's
absolutely.
It's interesting how like for a lot of people in the pandemic, it was like actually not working all of a sudden caused so much stress for people because they wrap their identity so much in that being busy and that working thing. And I've already mentioned this like twice on the podcast, but there's an amazing interview with Victor Wooten and from Corey Wong's podcast, where he just talks about how like, like musicians, it was really hard for them in the pandemic because they lost their identity because they couldn't play, they couldn't work.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're already here. You were already born. You're lucky. Like you made it to this earth. Like you just exist. That's a blessing. And it's not just about feeling busy or, wrapping up our identity in that feeling of busyness or the work that we identify with or whatever. It's just really important to kind of step back and just realize that you are already, you're already there,
Yeah. Crazy stuff, but
crazy times.
Anyway, yes.
So, but yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that and for sharing all your wisdom on this podcast episode.
Absolutely.
And I'm not even going to ask you the final question because I'm just assuming you already answered it, which is a first.
Patience.
The patience. Unless you have more to add to that, we could.
I don't think so. If I were to tell my younger self something, no, just patience. Which, thinking back, funny enough, I almost want to listen to the first podcast because I feel like that's probably what I told myself back then too. Which is kind of just my consistent mantra of just patience. And even looking back 2 years ago, it's like the things I wanted back then I wasn't ready for. I needed the patience to be ready for it. It takes time. It's patience, but you'll get there. Just don't give up. That's my encouragement to anybody listening, I guess, is just
I'm with you 100%. Totally. Well, Josh, thank you so much. It's been a blast. I'll put links to your stuff in the show notes and stuff. So
cool.
Yeah. Have a great one, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, man. You too.